In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the Android platform. Now, as you're probably aware, every version of Android has a particular name, a particular version, and there's been lots of different versions of out over the years. It's important that you understand this as you start to develop your Android applications. There are a few exercises we're going to be doing together during this video. So from time to time, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and do a little task. And we're going to start this straight away. I'd like you to look at the images on the screen, pause the video, and assign Android names to each of the pictures. Okay, have you done that? Let's see if you were correct. Okay, and there's all the different version names. Ice cream sandwich, honeycomb, cupcake, donut, froyo, jelly bean, Kit Kat, gingerbread. Each of these names reflects a different version of the Android operating system. So for your next job, I'd like to place those in the correct order, starting with the earliest on the left and the latest on the right. So pause the video now and have a go. Have you done that? Let's see if you're right. So there's the chronological order based on the versions. So Cupcake was the very first version, and the latest version is Kit Kat, which is just coming out now. Do you know what the version numbers were that go with each of those versions? I'll give you a starting point. Cupcake was version 1.5 and Kit Kat is version 4.5. So let's pause the video and see if you can assign the version numbers to each of those versions of Android. So let's reveal the correct answers. So Cupcake was version 1.5, Donut started at 1.6, and all the way up to Jelly Bean, which was 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, and Kit Kat is 4.5. At the time of recording this video, the Android market share by version looked a little bit like this. So we're going to be working with Android 4.0 and above, which is ice cream sandwich and jelly bean. And if you look at that, we're almost covering 75% of the Android devices on the market by focusing on the latest versions of the operating system. Generally, to downgrade to 2.2, 2.3 is more trouble than it's worth, especially with the advanced features, and Honeycomb was only briefly available for tablets, so we can ignore that particular version. Now, when you develop your applications, you actually specify two Android versions. You specify the target SDK, which is the SDK people should be using to use your application. But you can also specify a minimum SDK version. And the minimum version is the version which you're prepared to support through making tweaks to your code and changes. Now, when we're doing our development, I would strongly recommend that you set both to version 4.0. That way, you've got minimal issues when you come to test. There's two ways we can describe the Android version numbers. The most common way that people use is the version numbers with a decimal point, so 1.5, 1.6, all the way up to 4.2 and beyond. But when we do our development work, there's also an integer value, a whole number value we can use to identify the version numbers. So for example, version 4.0 is actually internally SDK version 15. And that's really useful because we can do if statements based around the version number. We can do simple calculations based on whole numbers. The other values are stored as strings, which is more difficult. And you can retrieve both those versions by using simple properties of the SDK. Ideally, you've got your own Android device to test on, and hopefully it's running version 4.0 or above. If you haven't, then don't worry too much. There's a fantastically good simulator built into the development tools which you can use to test. And if you want to test on a real device, we have some devices running slightly older versions of Android, 2.3 I believe, which you can borrow from the lab assistant as long as you return those at the end of the lab session. Before you can use your device for development and testing purposes, you have to set it up. Now, if you're running a really old device, running version 1 or version 2 of Android, under the application settings in the settings menu, you'll find a development option, and you can turn the settings on in that development option. And once you've turned all those options on, you can plug the phone in and it'll test it on your phone. If you're running 4.0 or above, then it's slightly different. Directly under the settings screen, the development options has all the settings in one place. However, if you're running 4.2 or above, that option will not be there. To enable it, you have to go to the About Phone screen on the settings page, find the build number, which should be listed, and tap it 7 times. You know you're getting it right because after the 3rd tap you get a funny message on the screen saying you're 4 taps away from being a developer. 4 more taps and the developer options should appear. So before the next lab session you should set your phone up as a development device. We've covered enough here to get you started. There are more videos to watch for this week. There's a walkthrough which covers developing a simple application. There's a little video about the assignment which you might want to have an early look at to see what you've got to do. And each week you're going to be asked to watch certain videos. So please watch the videos you're asked to watch and use the lab sessions to ask any questions you may have.